Hello everyone, and welcome to this bite-sized PD, where the topic is tips for monitoring technology use in the classroom. The learning intention for this PD is I want you to learn about ways to monitor technology in your classroom, specifically when students are using it. And the success criteria is that you'll know you're successful when you can pick a tip or idea to implement that can support you when your students are using technology in your classroom. And I'm hoping that, and knowing the teachers that in our district, I have an assumption a lot of these ideas and tips are not going to be new, maybe good refreshers, but also if something is new to you or you recognize an area of growth, feel free to pick one or two. Don't feel like you have to implement every tip right away, but just these are good things to keep in mind as you are monitoring technology use. So here is the agenda. I'm purposely starting with our CSD Student Responsible Use Guidelines and the DigSIP framework. I think those are two things to be aware of and get familiar with, specifically when monitoring technology use, because it goes beyond just using, like tip number 4, the monitoring software, Land School and Apple Classroom. The other tips are just good things to keep in mind, good strategies to put into your practice, once again, to ensure that when students are using technology in the classroom, they're using it appropriately and they're using it safely. So with tip number 1, CSD Student Responsible Use Guidelines. If you are not familiar with this or haven't seen the updated version, I strongly recommend that you take the time to read through it. This was updated fall of 2024. It was updated to align with our digital citizenship competencies. And a lot of the guidelines remained the same, but there were some updates just to keep up with the times and some of the examples of misuse that we have seen, wanting to ensure that we are providing guidance, once again, just to ensure when students are using technology, it's done safely and responsibly. So when you're monitoring for technology use, this responsible use guidelines can be used to help you maybe be aware of what to look for or what to even reinforce and teach your students. So once again, if you have not looked at it or read through it, I strongly recommend that you do so. This is something that is signed yearly during the online registration process by students and families. How thoroughly they read this, I'm not sure. And I do think many times, while the student might be there, the parents or the guardians may just sign it for the student. But this is a resource, once again, just to help reinforce the types of positive behavior you want to see students do or portray when they're using technology in the classroom. So when you have access to this presentation, if you click the image, that will take you to a copy of this. It will also take you to, you can also access this or send families to this if they want a copy of their own on the Family Connections webpage. So the next tip is familiarizing yourself with our digital citizenship competencies. Like I just said, this responsible use guidelines was updated to really align with our DigSIP competencies. The 5 competencies are being inclusive, like how do you engage with others online to do it with respect and empathy, being informed, how to evaluate the accuracy, perspective, and validity of online information, engaged, using technology for civic engagement and to be a force for good, balance, making informed decisions about how to prioritize time and activities online, whether you're online or off, and being alert, being aware of your online actions, knowing how to be self and create safe spaces for others. And if there's any opportunity that you can help teach and reinforce these digital citizenship competencies and the behaviors we want to see, it's good to help educate and keep the messaging for what you should be doing versus all of staying away from what you shouldn't be doing, the can'ts, but trying to ensure that we're having that positive message of here's what it looks like to be safe, here's what it looks like to be informed. Anytime you as the teacher can model these competencies as well. And like I said, once again, if you haven't taken the time to look at this, you'll see where the responsible use guidelines have been divided into those competencies to help even reinforce some of the behavior we'd like to see. So tip number 3 is to establish clear expectations and procedures. So it's important that you set classroom technology rules and review them frequently. And I know a lot of teachers do a great job, especially at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the semester, of here's my expectations for technology use. But it's a good reminder to review those rules, even have them posted somewhere that you can quickly point to, especially if you notice a student is maybe not following the expectations. Something else that you can do as an educator is include your expectations in a class syllabus. If you have expectations on like a Canvas course, that way, once again, you're being transparent and you have something to keep pointing back to. And I think it's a great idea too with your expectations to align them with the student responsible use guidelines. I do have a link here because I know a lot of teachers are starting to integrate AI into their technology use as well. This link will take you to a web page that provides some sample disclosure statements or syllabus statements of if you want to be specific about AI use in the classroom. I would just encourage you, don't just focus on the AI technology use aspect, but think about your technology use in general, like what type of, when they're using devices, when they're visiting websites, when they're using online programs. But this AI example can give you some, just some examples of what it could look like if you want to include AI on top of the general technology use as well. Once again, remind students about the student responsible use guidelines. It's important to clarify when technology is allowed and when it's not, and being consistent with your expectations. And then be specific about procedures to follow. Taking out and putting away devices. Like I know in our elementary classrooms, they are not a take-home model. So a lot of their devices are stored in like Chromebook carts. So it's important to, and I know a lot of elementary teachers in schools do this where the Chromebooks are numbered and they have a specific slot that they go into. It is important to take the time. And I know a lot of teachers out there do this and have had success with this. It's important to ensure you are being explicit, even having them practice those taking out and putting away devices, even how they handle and carry, and what are your expectations when they're using devices independently for independent work. So just like with classroom management, when you have expectations for when students are working together in groups or walking down the halls, the same type of expectations and procedures should be set in place for the technology use in the classroom. And once again, I'm going to say this probably so many times, you're like, we get it, Camille, but just really, like I said, connecting with that student responsible use guidelines, because that is a document, once again, parents and students are signing every year, and you can use that to help reinforce the type of procedures, or even, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but the kind of behavior that you're wanting to see when technology is being used. So this tip is now using monitoring software, and I'm going to talk about Land School and Apple Classroom because we have two softwares that we use, and I know a lot of teachers are familiar with this, but I want to just do a quick reminder because these are great softwares to help have a glimpse and be able to monitor what students are doing on the Chromebook or an iPad. So with Land School, this is the management software that's for a Chromebook. Once again, to help monitor those devices. And I have links here that will go to how-to documents of like what it is and how to get it set up. So with Land School, what's great about this setup is the class rostering happens via Skyward, so you don't have to create class rosters. However, if you are a teacher who maybe you don't have a Skyward class, like your class is not in Skyward, maybe like in our elementary schools, we have our Brain Booster teachers. They tend to have students from all over the school, but they're not connected via Skyward. There is a way for teachers who don't have kids in Skyward to actually create and generate their own class rosters. But if you're a teacher, you have your own class, the rosters are created for you. Land School is accessed on the web, so there's no special device setup needed for the teacher accounts or laptops. The Chromebooks are ready to go as soon as they connect to the district Wi-Fi. And so there's no student device setup is needed as well. And then one thing to note for this to work is teachers and students must be on the district Wi-Fi. So I would have a word of caution, something to be aware of. Some of our students have learned if they connect their Chromebook to maybe a hotspot, a personal hotspot, not the district Wi-Fi, that circumvents them being able to be monitored by Land School. So just something to be aware. So if you're noticing a student, you can't view a student's screen, that's one thing to check. And then that would be them going against the responsible use guidelines and having a conversation with them and reinforce the expectation that when you're at school, the expectation is you're using the school Wi-Fi. So if you have never used Land School before, your instructional coach, even myself, members of the DTL team in instructional supports, we can come help you and get started. But once again, these links will take you to some how-to documents on how to get started. And then with Land School, just to kind of go over some of the features that it can do, you can blank the screen. So as students are working, if you want to have their screens go dark so you can maybe talk to them or give some more directions, you can do that. You can share your screen, that broadcasts your screen to students. You can limit websites. A lot of teachers use this feature where you can limit the websites that they're able to go to. You can push a website, meaning if you're wanting to have all the kids go to a specific website, you can do that for them. You can change your class view. This is how you see the student screens on your computer. Resize the thumbnails. You can do a full screen thumbnail. This tends to be like your view on the teacher computer. You can capture a screen, meaning if you wanted to take a screenshot of the student's screen on yours, just to have evidence of where they were at or what they were looking at. I have had teachers tell me, though, they have better success or like their computer's screenshot function, like a Mac, a Shift Command 4 or 3. But you can also use the Land School screenshot feature. Students can actually use Land School to raise their hand to let you know they have a question. There is a way for you to message students, and then you can actually close a browser tab on a student's device if you choose to. And then there's a new feature that we just had enabled on Land School that many teachers aren't aware of yet. I think they've started hearing about it, but we're trying to get the word out. There is a new feature where you're able to view the student web history for a specific student. It views the history while they're being monitored by Land School, so it doesn't go when they're just using the Chromebook in general. But if you're monitoring, you can go to a student and view their web history if for some reason you need to maybe collect some evidence that you're recognizing they were going to websites they weren't supposed to. Your admin do have a way to get a list of the browser history in general. They need to work with IT or they go through Dashboard to get that. But for you as a teacher, if you're utilizing Land School, this feature is available for you. So for my teachers who use iPads, you aren't able to use Land School, but you are able to use Apple Classroom. This is where there is some setup on the teacher side and the student iPads. So you'll see I have links for you here. On the teacher iPad, there is an app that needs to be deployed, but there are some directions you need to follow to get that set up. The student iPad, there are some setup directions, but there's no app required. It's just setting up the iPad to be able to be connected to the teacher's account. This is where your school field tech can help you set up. Your instructional coach can be a resource as well. But very much like Land School, what Apple Classroom will let you do, you can organize your class, meaning you can break them into small groups. You can launch and lock apps. So if you don't want students to go to specific apps, you can lock them. Because let's all face it, sometimes you want the kid to go to a specific app, they go to the one they actually want to instead. You can navigate to specific content. It allows you to launch resources on all iPads, like even like a specific website on Safari. This allows you to see what students are seeing on their screen. You can share student work on the big screen. You can mute the sound and lock the screen, and then you can end your class and see a class summary. So just a way for you, if you're a teacher who utilizes iPads with your students, a way for you to be monitoring and even checking what they're doing as they are working. So this leads into my next tip, because just because you might be someone who utilizes Land School or Apple Classroom, I want to reiterate, this does not replace you as the teacher and your importance to still continually physically monitoring and maybe even positioning yourself to still take a peek of what kids are doing on their computers. So I have this picture here just because it's like, I see you. If the students know that you are walking around to observe their screens and observe their behavior, they're more likely to remain on task. And even then, kids are tricky. They know, oh, as soon as my teacher comes, I'll quickly, do the shortcut to go to the right tab I'm supposed to be on or whatever. But it's still important, even if you are using Land School and Apple Classroom, to still walk around and observe what your students are doing. It's even important to maybe think about your classroom, your desk arrangement. That can have an impact on the monitoring the technology use. And then even use an over-the-shoulder method to glance at, I'll fix this, glance at screens regularly as you move around. So it's not like you have to just keep going kid by kid and spend so much time with each student as you're looking. just walk around and glance over their shoulder to make sure they're on task and working on or on the website, the app that you want them to be on. So like I forget who this guy is, Walker, Texas Ranger. Anyways, like I see you, when the kids know that you're paying attention, they're more likely to stay on task versus not. The next tip is to implement accountability strategies. So have you come up with like what do kids do or what do students do when they're not using the computer at that moment? Some teachers have used device positioning cues like a 45% tilt or lids closed, meaning we're not using technology now, so lower your lid or close it completely. You can introduce some tech buddies or peer accountability partners, students to maybe keep each other on task. And then once again, be explicit with consequences for off-task behavior. And once again, I'm going to relay you back to that responsible use guidelines. Like ensure students, if you found breaking some of these rules, here's what the consequence is for that. So, and then once again, being consistent and explicit with those consequences. And then the last strategy is just to engage students in active learning and leverage the engagement strategies. I would be very cautious about like the free time you provide for tech use, because it tends to be the free time. I'm doing free time like this, but it tends to be the free time where we see a lot of students maybe misusing technology more often than not. So when you're using the technology, especially because our time within the classrooms is so precious and there's so much to get through in such little time, you want to make sure your tech use is purposeful. And I link to the TPAC framework because if you've ever taken any EdTech PD from me over the years or been to our DTL Summit, I always say the expectation for tech use is 1, know what you're teaching. You go back to those standards, your curriculum guides, your scope and sequence. The pedagogy, you know how you're going to teach it, how do your students learn, those instructional strategies that can really support student learning. And then 3, if technology can really support the learning, if it can help with enhance the learning, engage the students, then layer in and utilize that technology. Be very cautious of using technology where it can be a barrier or it can be a, what's the word I'm looking for? It can be I am bad with my words today. A disruption. So you want to make sure you're being very purposeful for when you're using and allowing tech in your classroom. 2 other things I recommend is go to our best practices for DTL and even the screen time recommendations when you're designing lessons. And I'm going to show you these because with the best practices for digital teaching and learning, it's really thinking about how technology can be used to support the learning environment, your community, but above all, like how can it help provide explicit instruction? How can it provide opportunities for practice? How can it help you assess what students are learning? What kind of data and feedback can you be getting? And how could it be used to provide some personalized learning opportunities for your students? Like, that is the power of technology, right? Like technology can be a way to really support that student learning. But once again, we just have to be so careful when we have students on devices because we want to make sure they're doing it in a safe and appropriate manner. And then with the screen time documents or recommendations, this is just a reminder of, we have the plate here, that when you're using technology, it should be more in the active high learning value or the passive high learning value. There should be a high learning value to it. And we shouldn't see as much low learning value use in the classroom. And we still want school to be fun, right? We still want kids to have a great time, but we just want to ensure when we're using technology in the classroom, it really is supporting the learning of the students, not taking away from that. Don't be afraid to use timers or structured work cycles to guide transitions between tech and non-tech activities. If you use programs like Canva, there's a built-in timer there. A timer I like to use a lot is the Google timer, where I'll actually pull up Google timer and I just say 5 minutes. But I use timers a lot when I'm working with students and using technology, because then they know how much time they have and how long we're going to be on there. Apply blended learning and universal design for learning strategies. This goes back to our best practices, so screen time recommendations and even TPAC. And then check in on students as they're working on tasks and assignments. And this even goes back to that monitoring with Land School or even that physical proximity. When you're having students engage, you want to make sure you're still checking in on them to make sure that they're working on what they should be. So those are the strategies. Those are the recommendations when monitoring the technology use in the classroom. If at any time you have questions, feel free to reach out to me at any time. My name is Camille Cole, and my email's here. Don't forget to check out our bite-sized PDs. You can watch any of the past ones for that relicensure credit, and there's the form to fill out if you'd like to get the relicensure credit for watching this bite-sized PD. So I hope this has been helpful, and have a great day, and please reach out if you need anything.